always quiet when she enters in. And what's funny is that as the year goes by and we get closer and closer and closer to thesis time, I think she comes in louder. Is that right? Anyway, she's got an interesting topic. It's not electric cars. Yeah, it's another really relevant topic in today's world, which is about cancel culture. And what is interesting to me is that as she got started on this topic of cancel culture, what seemed to me would be sort of a simple topic to cover became really complex, I think. It was really hard to figure out which areas to dive deep in. I mean, we've got all the woke stuff and the Me Too movement and all that stuff. What do we dive into and what do we not dive into? And so it became pretty complex, I think. I was trying to figure out how to do it, but I think it turned out well. So here's her words. She says, "I would like to thank God, who has given me the strength and wisdom to get me to where I am now, Mr. Wade for guiding me through the making of this thesis and worrying about it so much, Mr. Mark, my advisor, for helping me and prepare for this moment, my parents and friends for supporting me and being the place where I can release my frustrations, and I deeply apologize for those that turned into emotional punching bags." And last but not least, my two panelists, Mr. Hans and Mr. Christian, for taking my social science topic, though, ironically, being physics teachers. So her title, How to Kill a Society, a 21st Century Nightmare, Cancel Culture. Please once again welcome Jolene. Jolene, I'll start the timer and I'll tell you when you can start, okay? All right, you can start whenever you're ready.
There you are on the boardwalk. You're walking as you feel the ocean breeze, the salty air, and the ocean waves crash against the water. You continue walking, enjoying the sunset, when suddenly, someone pushes you inside the water. You don't know who did it, but what you know is that you're in cold water and you can't move. The more you struggle, the more you can't move. You feel something like a vacuum holding onto you, keeping you underwater. You don't know what it is, but then, just for a second, the vacuum, that something pulling you down, lets off. And the next second, it pulls you back in harder, faster, deeper, stronger. As you're going down, you see a silhouette of a person. You don't know who it is. Probably the one who pushed you. Probably someone just passing by. You try to scream out to them. You try to ask for help. But they're just standing there, not helping. As you're going in deeper, your vision gets hazy. And you realize that you can't breathe. You're suffocating. And you try to wake up thinking that this is all a bad dream. This is noticed when cancel culture pulls you back, suffocating your voice on social media. Welcome to the 21st century nightmare, cancel culture. Cancel culture originated from the Red Scare, which is a time where the world was at war against communism. During this time, McCarthyism was on the rise and very popular with its ideals and morals of fighting against communism. In the United States, people would cancel those associated with communism, and vice versa in Russia. Cancel culture itself started during the Me Too movement in 2010, where women spoke about their fight against sexual assault and anti-feminist movements. During this time, the woke culture was happening as well, where it was the fight against racism, where it meant that the Black community was aware of the situation they were in. However, this definition changed to being aware of any injustice happening. Cancel culture involves rejecting statements and active and public retaliation against the canceled target, which is rooted in broader patterns of social and cultural dynamics. It is not limited to any specific political affiliation, ideology, or any other defining characteristics, and it happens under every topic imaginable. Participants may share their perspectives on social media, sometimes mocking and shaming the cancel target, or even worse, calling others to not support them. It fails to teach and provide opportunities of growth to both parties, making it flawed due to the absence of space for personal development. Basic rights are the process by which free societies seek truth on policies that should be founded indefinitely. No government has attained liberty for its citizens while restricting their freedom of expression and due process. Due process and free speech are essential components of liberty, democracy, and truth. No society, even the most democratic, has ever let complete and unrestrained freedom of speech. Freedom of speech and due process are basic human rights, and cancel culture takes away these rights as it operates on the premise that people should have a politically correct way of thinking. Most people do not take this as a serious issue, and some others make the bad choice of joining in on the cancellation. Cancel culture abolishes diverse perspectives, creating a heartless society. And this is why cancel culture should not be embraced, for 3 reasons. First, it attacks free speech. Second, it corrupts context. And third, it promotes mob mentality. First of all, cancel culture attacks free speech and due process. The First Amendment of the American Constitution states that Congress make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. It protects the freedom of speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This means that whatever we say, the government cannot be involved in it, or whatever we say, the government cannot actively deny it. Free speech protects the people from government interventions, not the interventions of the public. So even if people say questionable things, they have the rights to defend themselves in court. Protection does exist from the government. However, there are still conditions. Law itself is not involved in any part of free speech where there are no precautions towards what anyone says. Even though someone has the legal right to speak freely, the public will cancel them in an instant and they will be unable to defend themselves. Moreover, the government is not someone that we can depend on in cases of free speech. Cancel culture and hate speech are often viewed as related. Both of them contain call-outs for objectionable behavior. The difference is, hate speech focuses on characteristics like race, religion, and gender, whereas cancel culture is seen as a form of social consequence for perceived wrongdoing. The US legal system, guided by the 7th Amendment regarding the court, relies on juries to make the decisions, which may lead to inconsistent enforcement. Cancel culture also goes against due process, which is outlined in the 5th Amendment, where it protects people from being subject to punishment without fair treatment. Despite the differing legal frameworks, both raise questions about social accountability, free speech, and free speech, and the balance between accountability and fairness. Cancel culture may be the repetition of history, where we can see societal fear and bias that have emerged throughout history and its potential ramifications if left unchecked. The Red Scare happened post-World War II, starting 1947 until 1954, marked by the spread of communism in Eastern Europe and China's Communist Party taking over. Joseph McCarthy is a familiar name when we talk about the Red Scare. He claimed that communists had infiltrated high government ranks, and he then launched investigations that led to the loss of employment for many, despite very few being convicted. Even though this event cannot be categorized as cancel culture, it is important to realize that it displays the definition of cancel culture. The probability of the world fighting against communism and liberalism is very unlikely. However, it may be about other things, such as feminism and masculinity. If cancel culture is not regulated, it can cause the next world war, taking aspects of war online. Second, cancel culture corrupts context. It corrupts and is able to configure the credibility of someone. Social media is a form of digital media where people are able to say what they want, and information spreads a lot faster on social media due to the distance factor being eliminated by the internet. Through this, others can track down what people have said in the past, and it is used to determine whether someone is credible or not, otherwise known as digital footprints. Due to the fast-paced nature of microblogging, Twitter has become a prime source for popularizing news, even if it is not always true. It has gained a reputation to spread misinformation and rumors. Let's take the case of Kevin Hart in 2018. Kevin Hart was nominated to be the host of the Oscars. Because of this, people looked into his history because he's already popular and people want to find out more about him. It's natural. So they continue to find his digital footprints and they start scrolling through his Instagram, his Twitter, and his Facebook, everything. And they find a tweet that he tweeted in 2011 and they accused him of being a homophobe. This led to Kevin Hart forcibly asked to quit his job, and this resulted in other people not wanting to be the host of the Oscars because they didn't want to be canceled like Kevin Hart. Next, cancel culture impacts mental health as it attacks individuals instead of the ideas. In other words, known as ad hominem, where it attacks the circumstance and the trustworthiness rather than the substance of the argument or action. Online freedom transforms call-outs into canceling, aiming to erase someone from social platforms, otherwise termed as deplatforming. The case of James Charles accurately represents this, where he took a business decision with Tati Westbrook, where he made the decision to support her rival, her business rival. And he was proactively canceled because Tati Westbrook went online about it and mentioned that she was disappointed with James Charles because he supported her rival despite him being her friend. So James Charles was proactively canceled. And throughout this cancellation, he was canceled for sexually assaulting boys. Now this is peculiar. Why? Because what was first a business decision turned out to be a cancellation for sexually assaulting boys. It affects individuals' well-being and causing self-care measures in the face of relentless personal attacks. Other than that, cancel culture affects the reputations in economic aspects, such as employment and marketing. Organizations feel the need to distance themselves from potential targets of cancel culture, or those who are already targets of cancel culture. Hastily cutting ties or unemploying people questions the company's commitment to due process, especially if there's no investigation. Companies are expected to follow the trends, such as LGBTQ rights and Black Lives Matter, or risk being seen as a complicit. False advertising creates a negative perception or bad image, which overshadows the good products that companies produce. Consumers demand both words and actions ready to hold them accountable. Cancel culture encourages mob mentality through vigilantism. Vigilantism is when people take matters into their own hands and give out punishments out of official channels. This behavior is found in places where there's a lot of social rule breaking, even more so when the people don't trust the government. Thinking subjectively can lead to inconsistent behavior in what they say and what they believe. Social media gives a platform where they let people act as judge or jury, which can endanger themselves and other people and putting others at risk. This blurs the line between government action, government authority, and citizen action, making the online world a chaotic place where it is hard to hold anyone accountable. Cancel culture's mob mentality destroys digital citizenship, impacting the safety and interactions online. Digital citizenship is the identity and behavior in the online realm, emphasizing and maintaining a positive digital footprint. Disinhibition is the negative side of digital citizenship, which is where people exhibit mean and spiteful behavior online that they wouldn't in real life. Anonymity, lag time, and the lack of nonverbal cues through the internet allows people to hurl insults without fear of consequence. Through this, third parties start to pick sides, increasing the power and validation of both parties, perpetuating the cycle of cancel culture. This creates an unsafe environment online, where the target is powerless against the collective force of the online mob. Lastly, cancel culture encourages mob mentality through fear association, where it affects third parties associated with the targeted individual. So let's say there's a class and the teacher is teaching the material and two students are talking. The teacher calls out one of the students at the back. Chances are that the friend is also called out is high because they were seen together. Now let me ask you another question. If your friends jump off a cliff, would you jump too? This is an accurate representation of fear association, where people who get asked this question often answer, no. No, why would I jump off a cliff? Correct? Well, this tends to contradict itself, where people actually jump off a cliff because they don't want to be seen as a loser, and they want these connections with their friends. They still want to keep them, so they join them. See, cancel culture here is no different. People fall so easily into peer pressure that they agree to do activities with their friends in order to not lose them. This is the type of mob mentality that cancel culture promotes. Fear association in cancel culture promotes fearful behavior, similar to the fear of missing out, which leads to people canceling not because they dislike the person, but out of fear because they don't want to be the next target. Individuals cancel not for the right reasons, but to avoid public humiliation and maintain social connections. Now, some may say that cancel culture presents itself as a response towards hate speech, and it aims to counter and promote free speech. However, cancel culture has proven itself to be contradictory. It often shuts down the voices of the targets and ignoring opposing perspectives. Free speech is the ability of the people to express themselves without fear of the government interference. However, cancel culture's tendency to shut down opposing views goes against this very idea. If the government is chasing someone just because of something they said online, then either one, the person who said something online did something very trivial, or two, the government is acting like an immature child. And I'm pretty sure the second option is very, very unlikely. Others claim that cancel culture fosters collective identity by uniting people based on similarities. However, this creates more mob mentality than genuine connections. Canceling someone should not be used as a bonding activity, as collective identity is formed from the people without any push. When people have someone to cancel or something to talk about, they have something to connect about. And this is the danger because of the similarities they have online. People will not want anything to do with these people once they meet in real life. Cancel culture creates division and promotes a harmful behavior online. To wrap things up, cancel culture abolishes diverse perspectives, resulting in a heartless society, and should not be embraced because it attacks free speech, corrupts context, and promotes mob mentality. Call-out culture on social media is inevitable, and everyone makes mistakes. Since it is the digital age now, it is pointless to cut everyone out of the internet because of every single little mistake they make. cancel culture is not inherently negative, but there must be the essence of forgiveness. This forgiveness pushes people to change. Consequences are a crucial factor in self improvement, and with forgiving, people are able to feel supported to change and do better. With everything in the world now, the values of humility, empathy, and understanding remain true. By embracing empathy and encouraging open mindedness, we can break down the barriers of cancel culture and move towards a more compassionate and inclusive society. Though cancel culture may try to silence us, we must not let it drown out the symphony of our diverse voices. Let us cancel out hate with understanding, cancel out division with unity, and cancel out fear with empathy. Together, we can rewrite the narrative and create a world where everyone's story matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Jolene. Good job. We'll start over here with Mr. Hans.
Right. Uh, First of all, congratulations, Jolene. Calm
Yay.
down.
Yay.
Yes. Thank you for the short comment. But then I would like to first go into some things that you do great. I think the first time I read your paper, I think it's a very fantastic comparison. The story that you have with the concept of cancel culture, because the way I see it, and I think I do personally see it, that once you're sucked in, I think there's no other way. In Indonesia, we call it maju kena, mundur kena. You want to fight against it, people will fight harder. But then if you if you go with the whims of those people, then you're just going to be get stranded by the currents, right? And then I think most of your points, the points that you make are relatively simple, but then that's also the strength in it, especially with the some poignant points that you make. I think especially with the mob mentality issue. Especially, I think there's one part where you mentioned that people cancel each other, cancel one same people not because of, I guess you would say, their moral obligation, but due to fear of them being the next target, right? And I think this is something that I've been reading into. When things do have like their aesthetic and their function, and sometimes those two don't match, right? But then I would like to first ask about a few things, especially from your writing. I do believe in your paper you've written about the Fifth Amendment being one essential part to your argument. And can you remind us again, especially, I think it's in regards to like one of part of the Constitution. Yeah.
The Fifth Amendment is regarding due process, where it protects people from being subject to punishment without fair trial.
Right. Thank you for the clarification. And I'm just asking here, maybe to help strengthen that point. You mentioned that it has been applied to other countries, and is it something that's widespread, or maybe is there even any exceptions to this case? Just wondering.
Can I ask what kind of exceptions?
Yeah, exceptions like are there any nation states who have not adopted this concept of due process, right? I'm just wondering here.
I think every country already has its own due process. However, I don't think all of them are connected with free speech because of their government systems. That's like not democracy.
Okay, so I guess different manifestations, right? And then just, I think one example that you picked, I think another example, a bit connected to the Red Scare, especially with the issues of communism. I think I'm just curious as to like, why do you choose Pulau Buru as an example? You do mention that usually people of communist affiliation in Indonesia are exiled to Pulau Buru. Why do you choose that one instead?
Oh, that's just a representation of the how brutal it was, like the fight against communism was, until people were like put away to another island just because they were communists.
social segregation. Yeah, because maybe the point I'm trying to make also is that I think there is like a stronger event which does beyond segregation. Yeah. So I'm just curious about the choice. But then, right, now onto your main points, right? Of course, I think this is something that I've heard and something that people have made against your point, right? Isn't actually like, isn't cancel culture great? Isn't it just accountability culture? And if anything, is it vigilantism already great? Well, you did mention, right? Vigilantism is the action at which the common populace take away, or if anything, takes the mantle of judge, jury, executioner. But then, if we think about, let's say, in this context, you talk about the US, which uses a jury system in their legal system, correct? Which doesn't that make that even the legal system itself is already vigilantism in a way, because it is the decision of the jury, right, that will either acquit or condemn the defendant. So,
So I did mention in one of my proofs about the Seventh Amendment regarding the court and how it relies on juries, and how it is rather flawed because it has inconsistent enforcement, and it's the same as vigilantism, where people have different opinions and they uh, just make the punishment according to their own ideals, which is not necessarily fair, and people also have different reasons. So in cancel culture, many people disregard the context and they do not look into the context and they just seek to cancel the victim first. And then they're like, oh, so this is why this guy did that. Oh well. Yeah, like that.
I guess the major difference there is the context, right? And in addition to that, now I would like to address one. I guess it's not necessarily a major claim that you've made, but it is. I do believe it is one claim that you've made, is that cancel culture happens in like any aisle, any political aisle, right? Maybe if you're talking once again in the context of the United States, is the left or the right. But then one interesting thing is that the examples you've given are mostly from the left leaning, you would say, the left leaning political affiliation. Now, with that being said, maybe do you have any examples of like a right leaning political affiliation that does, I guess, exercise cancel culture or something along those lines?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, there are a few in Korea regarding their idols. Yet I'm not entirely sure about like the story, but I do know that some idols were canceled because they got married or they started dating and so on and so forth.
That's an interesting other example of cancellation. But then next is this one. I believe freedom of speech is one of the main tenets that you're holding on, especially on this thesis, right? But then one part that I would love to ask is there any limit to freedom of speech? I do believe you've mentioned it, but then what are those limits? What is the limit of an individual's freedom of speech?
So I'm just going to take um, the limitations like online on social media. So the limits are usually when one's post or content has like insults, like with cuss words related to those, and they will be removed by the platform. However, if someone like simply trash talks with good, proper English or like proper language without using those cuss words, most of those are usually let off, which is why cancel culture is still ongoing.
Right. Thank you for the answer. But I guess to not necessarily elaborate, but also to move on with your to respond to your answer is that I believe that those limits are not necessarily limits given by the government. If anything, they're limits set by the platform they're on. May it be like Twitter, may it be Instagram, Facebook, whatever. But they are limits set by, I would say, the corporate, right? The company managing the platform. So in that case, then, what I'm a bit more curious about is what about the limits given by the government? Like, what is the limit for free speech? Like, okay, you pass this line, this is where the government intervenes. Maybe you can enlighten us on that one?
The line between government, the limit of the government is quite blurry because many people say things that mean other things, meaning that in this context it's okay, in this context it's not. So cancel culture really depends on the context, and free speech as well depends on the context and on the government's take on it as well. So I mentioned that the government can take cases of free speech into court, but there are still conditions. And those conditions are when it favors the government. So it makes the government look nice.
Okay.
Okay, but just very quickly. Okay, so I think, all right, thank you for the answer, Jolene. But I do believe that I think it's better to look into the actual limits because there are actual limits where governments, okay, this is beyond, and regardless of context, this needs to be investigated. Maybe the context will shine light, but then the thing is, there are certain limits. Calls to violence and incitement of violence. I think those are the two hard limits that the government does have on freedom of speech, which might be interesting to see later, maybe like differences of actual cancel culture or like actual proper calling out of a person. But yeah, that's just all response. Thank you for all the answers, and I'll pass the mic to Mr. Christian.
Hello, Jolene. Hi. First of all, I want to compliment you over a well done, a job well done over your speech. I like how your passion and your energy during your whole thesis statement, and I also love how detailed and articulate your thesis paper is. Okay, and yeah, I think you really did a good job overall. Now, well, let's just go ahead and go to the questions first, right? Okay, so in this case, well, both Mr. Hans and I quite agree about the abuse of cancel culture and how it's basically limiting free speech. But do you think do you have any perhaps examples where cancel culture actually did its purpose and brings justice, or maybe brings relief to some parties? Do you have any research or knowledge about that?
I have researched about it, but I cannot think of any on the top of my mind right now.
Okay then. All right, then I guess we have to go to a different question then, yeah? Right. Now, in many cases, cancel culture tends to be utilized by a lot of hardliners. Let's be honest about it, right? We have groups of people who are quite, in many cases, offended over, for example, statements, tweets, jokes, and all that, right? And they're basically clamoring about, oh, this person should be canceled, and their business should be abandoned, and blah, 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 right? Now, in the case of your thesis, you're asking this type of people to, well, lighten up in a way, right? So, but how do we communicate it? We have many cases of, well, some people interviewing others that are from this kind of, well, mentality, but their voices are usually rejected. Many cases you will see the party that's, well, that the hardliners just rejecting the arguments, even if they're respectful and proper, outright, or they start yelling and saying, you're racist, you're a bigot, and blah, and so on. So how can we actually move away from this kind of mentality if there's quite that kind of group that are a little bit too rigid in their belief and the way that they want to cancel just individuals over their, well, speech?
I think that people who cancel are like mentally complicated. Like I don't think that they have good decision making when they cancel someone, especially in cases where the person is not necessarily wrong, and they lack the research on the context. So I think that these people who cancel are rather hard to deal with. So we should turn our attention to the one who is canceled and show them that whatever mistake they did is fine. Yet of course, there are consequences. But with forgiveness, as I've mentioned before, with forgiveness, they will be pushed to change rather than pushed to shut down.
Okay, thank you for that answer. But I guess there's not really much options on how to reach out to the, well, as you stated, slightly mentally ill groups. Yeah. Because it can be arguable because that's some research has been saying that there's a huge rise of that kind of tendency, right? But is there really nothing we can do to finally like open their mindset and their horizons, perhaps?
Well, the nature of cancel culture, like back then, before the pandemic, and now, has changed a little bit, where the cancellations back then would go on and on for like several months, whereas now is more of a overnight thing, or like it's going to be uh, everyone's gonna be hype about it for the next like 3 days, and then it immediately dies down, and they go on to cancel someone, or like some other community cancels another community. So it's more of a, I would say, chain reaction. So people learn from the experiences that they have, because I believe that now many communities have canceled and were canceled, have canceled and were canceling. So I'm sure that these people are able to learn from their own mistakes.
So we just have to depend on the wisdom of the populace then, in a way. It's inevitable with the social life, isn't it? Right?
I mean,
Okay.
like, you're not going to cut out the internet, right?
Yeah, it's impossible at this point, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for that question. That good answer. Now, I guess I want to also ask, since well, we are talking about cancel culture, and as you mentioned earlier, there are cases where cancel culture was appropriate and well, maybe necessary, arguably, right? But what do you think should be the proper consequence? In the examples that you give, many of them are, well, they end up falling out of their jobs. For example, actors and, well, artists and so on, right? They end up not getting any more offers for movies and all that. So they're basically struggling in their life. Some others, they end up being imprisoned. Like if you remember the case of Ahok, right? Well, people put slander and an edit of a video that makes him sound, well, like he's defaming the Quran, even though it's actually not, right? And then he got canceled and he got imprisoned for it unfairly in a way, right? We can at least argue in that way. So, what do you think is the better consequence to this kind of people?
So I just thought of a canceling case. So this happened very recently during the Met Gala, where there was Stray Kids on the carpet. There's like a K-pop band, and they were like, the photographer, the paparazzi, was like bad mouthing them and saying that, oh, this they don't have any sense of fashion, blah blah blah, and the people found out his name and where he works, and he was suspended from his job for about, if I'm not mistaken, about 4 weeks. From that case, I think that, uh, well, in many cases actually, people receive like suspension. However, the cases that I used were indeed like the forced removal from the job. So I think suspension is good, like as from companies, like from the official authority of that person. I think that suspension is a good option for them to reflect, and so that they actually do take a break from their job, so that they will not have any further cancellation on their future works that they actually did properly.
Okay, so you're suggesting just for now that kind of punishment instead of going a little overboard on, for example, death threats or yeah, prison terms and so on, right?
I think that's a bit over. That's very much over, actually.
All right, agreed. Okay, so well, bringing back to that topic as well, we inevitably already have multiple cases of people being canceled wrongly, right? Is there any way we can, well, the damage has been done. Their reputations has been affected, and perhaps there are some people who still think that they actually committed something wrong, even though all the evidence, all the facts are pointing to innocence. How can we help this kind of victims? How can we bring them back to up to speed and perhaps restore them back to their proper positions?
I think first that we can look at the context of why they behaved that way and why they were canceled. And from there, we can support them by, for example, if it's celebrities, we can watch their content if we have time. And like, it's not like a forced thing where, oh, you have to support this one, you have to support this one. It's still up to us. However, with this canceling, I'm sure that their original fans who did not betray them will still support them. And I'm sure that they will get back up on their feet.
A beautiful answer. Thank you. Okay. How much time?
Yeah, we're sort of out of time. I have one quick question I just want to ask you, though. We've talked a lot about this kind of global canceling where celebrities and people, you know, who are famous are canceled or even in the public communities. How about in a small-scale canceling? Is there such a thing? Even here at CBCS, can a student be canceled?
Yes. There is an actual case that happened very recently. However, I don't want to talk about it. But it can happen. But it does happen. And it's more of, and how people handle it is more of, what can you do? It's already done. So what you can do is move forward, get back up on your feet, and face them.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Time is over. I'd like to go farther into that, but we will stop. All right, good job, Jolene. You've persevered the interrogation. You can meet over here at the backdrop with friends and family for photos. And so then we will be back here at 12:15 for Theo. Theo will start at 12:15. Thank you, guys.